Nursing homes are taking steps to limit the spread of COVID-19 as new daily cases cross 2,000 for the first time. FUMIO Kishida said to be Japan's next prime minister after winning the ruling party's leadership election. And North Korea claims it has tested a hypersonic missile that can travel several times faster than the speed of sound. You're watching The Big Story. I'm Olivia Quay. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Nursing homes are stepping up precautions as Singapore battles a surge of COVID-19 infections. Yesterday, the Health Ministry reported 5 more seniors between 69 and 79 years old had died from COVID-19 complications, and it's monitoring several growing clusters at nursing homes. Well, to safeguard elderly residents, some of the measures include more frequent testing of staff from once every 2 weeks to twice a week, while all residents will be tested starting from this week. Premises have been divided into separate zones with no intermingling allowed. Residents who are infectious will be taken to hospital and community treatment facilities. Well, if an outbreak occurs, an incident response team will be set up to ring-fence and care for the cases, and vaccination drives are carried out in nursing homes either by their in-house nurses or by mobile vaccination teams. Crossing 2,000 new daily cases for the first time, the pandemic here shows no signs of slowing down. The Health Ministry reporting 2,236 new infections as at yesterday, September the 28th. The latest figure includes 1,711 cases in the community and 515 among dormitory residents. The remaining 10 are imported cases. Among the local cases are 483 people who are 60 years old and above. Also, as of yesterday, 1,325 cases were warded in hospital, including 209 on oxygen supplementation. Another 30 were in critical condition in ICU. Professor Dale Fisher is here to discuss the current situation. He's a senior consultant at NUH's Division of Infectious Diseases. Welcome back to the show, Prof. Singapore surpassing the 2,000 mark for the first time, even as we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world. Can you share your take, vis-a-vis the current measures meant to bring down the case numbers?
Thanks, Olivia. These are numbers that were always expected, where we have to live with the virus, so we have to let it in. And we know the vaccine is not very good at stopping transmission. We know the vaccine is good at stopping severe disease. So as I've said on your show and others several times, the numbers don't matter nearly as much as the number in hospital, because that's the one putting the threat on our health system. And in fact, while those numbers have gone up a lot, obviously, there's still a lot of people that are in hospital that don't need to be there. We used to keep people in hospital for isolation purposes because we were trying to really contain it. But now that the strategy has evolved that we're not trying to contain it, we still have to message a little bit harder and be more encouraging that those people that aren't at risk now don't need to be kept in hospital for isolation, and they can go and do home recovery.
Right. So on that note, 30 people so far have died from COVID-19 this month, and a third of them were fully vaccinated. Well, that's worrying, Prof. What's your perspective on that?
Well, it's obviously sad when people die. I certainly wouldn't want to diminish that, but unfortunately, that's what this virus does, and that's why we've been so aggressive at containing it. But we really have to accept the fact that we have to come out of the pandemic. We can't keep containing it forever. That's not sustainable. There's, you can look anywhere, whether it's schools or social interactions, weddings, religious gatherings, people's businesses and livelihoods, family get-togethers, and indeed other health issues, whether it's about physical fitness or being able to access medical checkups or have your cancer screenings or mental health. There is just so much of a price for all those restrictions that we have to come out of them. And now that we've got a vaccine, but on your figures, you're saying a third of the 30 people in the last month that died were vaccinated. You've got to remember there's 10 times as many people vaccinated as unvaccinated. So you've got 10 times as many vaccinated and a third people dying. So this is like a 30 times protection rate. So that 96-97% is what we're always working on, is the effectiveness of the vaccine in preventing death. Unfortunately, it's not 100%.
Yeah, good point. Well, Prof, let's turn a bit more broadly, to border controls. The US has raised its travel advice for Singapore to its second highest level. Would the US's move deter other countries from discussing vaccines with Singapore? And should Singapore relax border restrictions?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it makes absolutely no sense for travel restrictions by and large, let alone US to raise its travel advice. You've still got more chance of catching it in the US than you do from catching it from a traveller from Singapore. But in fact, as you know, today we're more than 2,000 cases, but only 10 of those were diagnosed from people returning from overseas. So there's no bang for your buck in this, making people do all this quarantine on return, because it's 10 cases out of 2,000. So if it used to have a very important role when 10 cases in the community would have been very concerning, but now whether the numbers are 2,300 or 2,310, it really is not an issue. So I think border restrictions globally really need to go.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show to share those insights, Professor. That was Professor Dale Fisher, a senior infectious diseases consultant at NUH. A day after raising its travel health advisory for Hong Kong, the US has reversed its decision, saying it was an error. The city's status has returned to level 1, indicating a low risk. With COVID-19 infections falling sharply in recent weeks, Japan will end its state of emergency tomorrow as scheduled. But not all the restrictions will be lifted at the same time to prevent a resurgence of cases. And with the worst hopefully over for Japan, its next Prime Minister can now focus on a general election that must be held by November. FUMIO Kishida, a former foreign minister, is set to be sworn in as Yoshihide Suga's successor on Monday after he won the ruling Liberal Democratic Party's leadership election. Well, our Japan correspondent has more on what the world can expect from Mr Kishida.
Well, Kishida is known to be a consensus-building moderate stalwart within the LDP. And I think the world can really expect him to pursue his campaign pleasures, be it strengthening Japan's security ties with with other like-minded partners. Kishida has also said that Japan must boost its defense spending to cope with growing security threats. And he has promised to appoint a special aide of human rights in a move that is bound to upset China, I think. Other than that, his main campaign pleasures have been economic, and he has vowed tens of trillions of yen in stimulus spending and what he terms a new form of capitalism that can bridge the rich-poor divide that he said has been catalyzed by Abenomics. But mainly, I think Kishida is expected to continue Suga-era policies on climate change, on digital transformation, though his consensus-building nature means that Japan might expect him to take a stronger stance on divisive social policies, such as the right for married couples to keep separate surnames. I think his most immediate task will be to prepare for the upcoming general election. Even though the LDP may enjoy a honeymoon period under a new leader, the public really perceives him to be quite boring. And it remains to be seen if the LDP's decision to elect a candidate who is clearly not the public's top choice, as shown in media surveys, might backfire on the party when the general election is held by November.
《 North Korea claims the missile it tested yesterday was a hypersonic missile with a warhead that detaches and glides, while state news media said the weapon increases Pyongyang's defense capabilities. Hypersonic missiles are designed to fly on low altitudes at more than 5 times the speed of sound. With more is Dr Nah Liang Tuang, a research fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. Welcome to The Big Story, Doc. So, 3 missile tests in a month. What do you think North Korea is hoping to achieve from these tests? Any significance there?
So quite frankly, from my opinion, I think that Pyongyang is trying to initiate a game of brinksmanship where they will keep on proving increasingly destabilizing acts so as to pressure the United States and or its allies to initiate dialogue with the Kim regime on the latter's terms. I have to emphasize on the latter's terms with a bold and underlined phrase. Since Washington has stated that they are willing to initiate a conversation or initiate diplomacy with North Korea at any time, but North Korea wants the cards to be favoring it on its end. Frankly speaking, this is an established pattern of coercive international relations that is quite well established in the North Korean playbook. It's not the first time they've done this, to be honest with you.
If dialogue could only be initiated on North Korea's terms, and you already mentioned Washington, should North Korea's neighbors engage in this, even in this situation?
When it comes to any form of diplomacy, the most important person that North Korea wants to deal with is the United States. I might be wrong, and I seek anybody's understanding not to be offended, but when it comes to speaking to international partners, Seoul is a secondary objective for North Korea. It's always, number one, seek Beijing's approval, seek Beijing's support as an ally. Secondly, deal with the United States or negotiate with the United States or speak the United States as its primary adversary, and most other parties tend to fall by the wayside. And even international organizations like ASEAN would have somewhat extremely limited ability to influence North Korea. It's very much a US-centric game.
Well, Dr. Nah, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been most insightful. I've been speaking with Dr. Nah Liang Tuang from the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. Elsewhere, Filipino boxing star Manny Pacquiao is officially retiring from boxing to focus on his presidential run in the 2022 Philippine elections. Making the announcement in a 14-minute video on Facebook, an emotional Pacquiao said, quote, "I just heard the final bell, boxing is over." Well, up until now, he's been dividing his time between fighting and his duties as a senator. Activist Greta Thunberg roasting world leaders at a youth climate summit in Milan, calling their commonly used terms as empty words and unfulfilled promises, and that the last 30 years of climate action had amounted to blah, blah, blah.
This is not about some expensive, politically correct green act of bunny hugging or blah, blah, blah. Build back better, blah, blah, blah. Green economy, blah, blah, blah. Net zero by 2050, blah, blah, blah. Net zero by 2050, blah, blah, blah. Net zero, blah, blah, blah. Climate neutral, blah, blah, blah. This is all we hear from our so-called leaders. Words that sound great, but so far has led to no action.
And that's Daniel Craig back for the final time as James Bond, leading the cast of the new film No Time to Die on the red carpet for its world premiere in London. Delayed for well over a year due to the pandemic, it will open in Singapore tomorrow, and we'll have a review on tomorrow's show. Back home, changes will be made to public sector construction tenders called from November the 1st to factor in risks arising from pandemics like COVID-19. The key amendments are to allow contractors to apply for a time extension due to a pandemic, as well as to include provisional sums for anticipated pandemic-related expenses, for which the extent or cost is unknown at the time of tender. Meanwhile, HDB has appointed new contractors to take over these 5 BTO projects affected by Great Earth's liquidation earlier this month, with construction works progressively resuming from early October. All 5 projects will be further delayed by about 2 to 3 months due to the time needed to bring in the replacement contractors and for them to mobilize their resources. Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. See you tomorrow on The Big Story.